Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
Hey, it's William, and welcome to today's episode of the Catalytic Leadership Podcast. Each week, we tackle a topic related to the field of leadership. My goal is to ensure that you have actionable steps you can take from each episode to grow in your own leadership. Growth doesn't just happen. My goal is to help you become intentional about it. Each week, we spotlight leaders from a variety of fields, organizations, and locations. And my goal is for you to see that leaders can be catalytic no matter where they are or what they lead. I draw inspiration from the stories and journeys of these leaders, and I hear from many of you that you do too. Let's jump into today's interview. It is such an honor today to have Dave Albin on the show. Dave is the #1 Firewalk instructor in America. Having worked for Tony Robbins for 19 plus years and starting Firewalk Productions in 2014, Dave has firewalked hundreds of thousands of people. He and Tony Robbins set a world record in London in 2005, walking over 12,300 people. Now, his success has a scary and violent past. On June 8th, 1988, he put a gun to his head to stop the excruciating pain from both drug and alcohol addiction. 2023 will mark 35 years of sobriety. Dave's clients have included Google, NASA, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Heineken, Remax, Entrepreneurs Organization, Chick-fil-A, Crisp Video, Mystery Hill, Y.M.C.A, the Omni Hotel, the Waldorf Astoria, so many others. Dave, man, wow, what a joy to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, William. Really, thanks, Doc. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I love your podcast, man. It's good stuff.
Oh, I appreciate that. I would love for you to share some of your story with our listeners, Dave, particularly around your journey, your development as a leader. How did you get started?
Well, I was born to a single mom, and she couldn't afford myself and my two half brothers. And so she did, in a very loving act, she put me up for adoption, and her sister, which would have been my biological aunt, adopted me. And her husband was military. And so we moved from where I was living in Hollywood, California, to Long Beach, California. And that was about the age of 5. And by the time age 11 came around, they set me down and said, "Dave, we're not your parents." And so that was, yeah, right. It was like, what does that even mean? Right. And so juggling that, and then they both had sworn off alcohol when they adopted me. And by the time, again, it's about the same time they told me that they weren't my parents, they both started drinking. And so that, my life took a hard turn at that point. And I started drinking shortly thereafter, as you read there in my bio. And, things got pretty bumpy, pretty rough, though I was somehow able to maintain some semblance of life, though once the drugs took hold and I started hanging around with, we are who we spend time with, right?
Yes. Yep.
As Tony always says, pick your friends and pick wisely, because you will become who you spend time with. And so I was hanging around with the wrong people, and it just kept accumulating, Doc. It just got worse and worse and worse. And then one day woke up, and I was like, that's it. We're done. I'd hit threshold. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't. It was just too painful. There was way too much emotional pain, too much physical pain, drugs, alcohol. And all I wanted it to do was end. It's got to stop today. I'm just not going to do this anymore. And so I took out a pistol, loaded it, put it in my mouth, and started juggling with that. And the juggling part was because I was married to a woman who had 3 kids. They were my stepkids. And I remember thinking, oh man, dude, when you pull this trigger, that's the aftermath of that is something that they're going to have to see and deal with. And I remember thinking, that's not fair, man. You can't do that to them. And so I decided, well, then go out in the woods and do it, right? Just move the location, but they're still going to have to deal with it. it's going to permeate through school. Everybody's going to know that their stepfather committed suicide, and that, you know, leaves them with that label. So I was like, no, man, you can't do that. That's just wrong. You got to figure out another way. And the next thing I know, Doc, I go, we'll call Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm like, and as I look back today, I'm like, I didn't even know who Alcoholics Anonymous was.
Wow.
But yeah, but there's that thought in my head, right? So divine intervention, if you will. I pick up the phone, I call AA, and they sent a man to pick me up. And that guy, Lauren, who we lost Lauren a few years ago, but you know, he saved my life. There's no question about it. And so when he took me to AA that day, he took me to 4 meetings. He stayed with me for a 12:30, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30 meeting.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, that's one day. That's day one. Yeah. And the guys, you know, they listen to my story and they go, this kid's sick. He needs help. He needs us really bad. So there was a lot of gatekeepers there watching me. And they gave me a big book. They gave me a how it works. And they gave me a lot of literature. They wrote their names in the book. They gave me their phone numbers. And the next morning when I woke up, my phone rang at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's John. And I'm like, hey, John. And he goes, how are you this morning? You know, all enthusiastic. And I'm like, I want to kill something or somebody. I might start with you, pal. Right? I mean, I was not in a mood to be, you know. And he said, so, hey, you know, you want to go get some breakfast this morning? Let me come over and pick you up. And then, of course, obviously what he was doing is he was getting me back to another meeting. Yeah. So one day turned into two turned into a week, and a week turned into a month. And then at a month, you know, they give you that little medallion, man, that little coin that says 1 month. And then 1 month turned into 2, 3 months. They keep giving you chips, and they give you one at 6 months. They give you one at 9 months. And then they gave me the 1 year chip. I'd made it 1 year without a drink or a drug. And so what happened there is the AA kind of got me involved with the personal development industry only because I had insomnia, and I was up late one night, and there he was, you know, the man himself, Anthony Robbins, a young Tony Robbins, enthusiastic Tony, you know, selling through Gunther Ranker back in those days. This would have been in like 1988. Late 1988, maybe early 89. And he was selling a program, and it was called Personal Power. And it was a 30-day program for total success. And I'm like, you know, and I didn't even like him. I thought, wow, what a pompous ass this guy is, right? And, you know, but he said a couple of things, Doc, that really hit me hard. One was, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. Ooh. And I went, whoa, okay. I get that, because that's what I chased with alcohol, right? Yeah. I was either trying to avoid pain or gain pleasure in my alcoholism, and then one day it left me. It wasn't doing either, right? None of it. Yeah. And then he said, we're encouraged or we make decisions out of inspiration or desperation. And I remember thinking, damn, dude, you got me with another one, because I'm pretty damn desperate. And so I bought his program. And he sent it to me. You know, it's like I maxed out my American Express card at that point. It was $179 or $189, maybe it was, right at that. And, you know, and I jokingly say it came on little white things called cassette tapes. Your audience, many of them won't even know what those things are, right? You'll have to go Google, what's a cassette tape? Go to the Smithsonian. So I plugged them in, Doc, and I started listening to him, and I was like, just could not believe. In fact, one of the first things he says in the first tape, he says, listen, by the way, I want to warn you right up front. I'm going to take you through this 30-day process, but you've got to go from start to finish, and you've got to do what I tell you to do. And if you're not going to do that, then just go give the program away. Wow. And I thought, he's talking to me. Did he know? You know, because that's what I was going to do, right? It was like, yeah, I'll probably, you know, I'll dabble in it. I'm not going to go all in. And so that was enough to go, all right, you're on, dude. I'm going all the way through. And I did. And I started doing what the man taught me to do, and it worked. Well, what happened from there was I loaned that program to a buddy of mine in AA. And then 7 years later, in 1995, he calls me on the phone like a little kid at Christmas. He was so excited. He's out of his mind. Like, almost can't talk. And he's like, hey, Dave, oh, my God, did you know Tony Robbins is coming to town, man? He's coming right here to D.C. And I'm like, no, I didn't know. And he goes, look, man, you got me into this. You got to go with me. We got to go see this guy. And I went, all right, Dan, I'm with you. Let's do it. I'll go. And so he goes, look, I'll make the arrangements, man. I'll call you back and make, take care of everything. So he calls me back like an hour later and he goes, done. We pick up the tickets at will call. And here's what they said to do. Number one, hydrate, bring water, make sure you're well hydrated. You're going to need to stay hydrated throughout the program. 4-day event, right? He said, bring snacks because you're going to spend a lot of time in the room. What an understatement that was. For anybody that's ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar, they know what I'm talking about. He's insane. He said, bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out. I said, okay, Dan, how much was the ticket? $700. I owe you $700. He goes, yes, sir. And I said, all right, well, don't worry. I'll play full out for $700.
That's right.
And so he's getting ready to hang up the phone, right? And he goes, oh, wait, by the way, I forgot to mention, man, we're going to be doing a firewalk. And when he said that, it was like time slowed down, right? It's like, whoa, firewalk. And I remember thinking, now I'm not saying anything to Dan, but my brain is going, no, oh, hell no. No. Oh, no, we're not doing that. That's insane, right? And you know what's interesting about that, Doc? I didn't even know what a firewalk was. I was making a decision about something that I didn't even know, which was a really interesting distinction for me in my life. How many times I said no to things that I attached fear to. So, right.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah. So what's the acronym for fear? Face everything and rise, or forget everything and run, right?
That's right.
Or like we like to say in AA, false images appearing real.
So good.
And I think that's what got me. And so I remember going, yeah, sure, Dan, firewalk. Yeah, really interesting. Hung up the phone and went, no, hell no, hard no, not doing that. Well, you get to the event. We get there, you get registered, and Tony takes the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight.
Wow.
Right back to that, be prepared to spend a lot of time in the room. 10 hours. I'm in a room for 10 hours. It's after midnight. And I'm not doing it. And all he's doing all day is really preparing you for that firewalk.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Tony goes, take off your shoes. And I remember going, oh, no, oh, no, you're not tricking me, pal. I don't think so. And then all of a sudden I go, but wait a minute. If we have to go outside and I don't take my shoes off, and I'm with 3,500 people. Yeah. And they're all taking their shoes off. And I'm going, if you don't take your shoes off, they're going to look at that guy over there. He's a coward. He didn't take his shoes off, right? So now my ego's kicking in, right? So I'm like, well, I'll just take my shoes off. Nobody's going to know. And so then he's not done with you yet, right? So next thing you know, he's got everybody chanting. And you're clapping their hands, or yes. And now you got 3,500 people chanting, which is like pretty intense. Yeah. And when he gets you outside, he's got African drummers, right? So it's dun 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 dun. Everybody's clapping, and so you're just like, oh, you got to be kidding me, man! What is going on here? And so when you get out to this parking lot, it's a huge parking lot. We were at a convention center, and over in the corner, Doc, he's got a big giant fire burning that's been burning all day. It's probably every bit of 20, 25 feet wide, and it could be, 50, 60 feet long. And so they build this giant fire, and it burns all day. And then it renders at night after they burn it all day, and then you've got this big, giant pile of coals. Yeah. And so how they set that up is they would load the coals in a wheelbarrow, and then they'd bring a wheelbarrow in between two lanes of sod, of grass. And the grass is, 3 feet wide, and it's about 15 to 18 feet long. And they would just take shovels, and they would sprinkle the coals from the shovels on top of the grass. And that's what you walk on.
Okay.
So that's the setup. Well, I'm not doing this. So my strategy is I'm just going to go hide in the back. Nobody's going to know. I'll just be back there by myself, right? Well, okay. Sounds good on paper, but it's not a very good, strategy. And the reason is Tony's people know where all the cowards are. So
well planned.
Well, so, and that's the thing. And that's what I love about Robbins, in that what he did there is because he doesn't want you to miss this experience.
Yeah.
He knows this could be a top 10 experience in your life easily. Yeah. And so he wants to do everything he can to get you through that process, so you step through those fears that have crippled you for your entire life, right? So next thing, I'm in the back and I'm just minding my own business, and everybody's chanting yes, and the African drummers, and it's and I'm standing in front of, I got like 3,000 people in front of me. I can't really see anything, so I'm just gonna hang out at the back. Well, here comes this guy out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he makes eye contact with me. And I think Tony must train him. When you make eye contact with him, don't take your eyes off him, right? And so this guy's like staring at me, and he's getting closer and closer and closer, and all of a sudden he gets to maybe 20 feet in front of me, and he kind of like looks at me like with a puzzled look on his face, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And of course, when we're not okay, what do we say?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm fine. Oh, we're good here, buddy. All good. No problems here. And he goes, "Oh, good." He goes, and here's a guy that asked me a question. He's a stranger, and he started changing my life with a couple of questions. And to this day, I don't know who this guy is, but he says, "Oh, good. I'm glad you're fine." He says, "Hey, are you going to walk tonight?" And I said, "Absolutely not. Like, didn't you get the memo, pal? I'm not doing this. Why do you think I'm back here?" And all of a sudden he goes, and this is what got me. And he says, "Well, wouldn't you at least like to watch?" And I said, and I went, "Well, yeah, sure. I'd love to watch these people burn their feet off. Let's do that." And he says, "Well, look, man, you can't see anything from back here, obviously. You're going to have to get in line." But he's telling the truth. In his defense, William, he's telling the truth.
Yeah,
he really is. And so I said, all right, I'll get in line. Well, again, to set the ambiance, you got the drums going, everybody's chanting. It's a beautiful summer night. The stars are out. You're in this big parking lot, big fire going on over here. And now I'm just kind of in line moving forward. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes this guy. And he comes up and he kind of loudly whispers in my ear, "He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go." And then whew, he was like gone, just like into the night. I'm like, what the hell was that? Who was that? Right? Where did this guy come from? And then I get to a certain point in the lane. I can't see in front of me. Again, I got thousands of people, but I can see at an angle. Yeah. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden I look and I go, "Oh my God, look at that. They're doing this. They're walking." And every race, creed, and color. Everybody, boom. Young, old, tall, short, black, green, blue, everybody's walking.
Wow.
And I'm mesmerized. I'm in a total trance, and I can't believe what my eyes are seeing. And anybody that's ever done this for the first time knows exactly what I'm talking about here, right?
Wow.
So I'm just mesmerized, and I'm watching, and I'm watching, and I'm watching, and all of a sudden, boom! Guess where I am? I'm at the front of the line.
Just to watch, though, right?
Just to watch. Right. And now, and I'm looking down, right? I'm looking at the coals. Excuse me, and they're bright red, and there's a wheelbarrow there, and you can feel the heat coming off. And I'm staring into the abyss. My heart is beating. It's like, it's coming out of my chest.
Yeah.
And so as I'm staring down at these coals on this lane of sod and the wheelbarrow and the heat, there's a trainer standing there. And all of a sudden he goes, "Eyes up." Like, "You dummy. You've been in a room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins, and guess what he taught you in the room? Told you about 100 times. Keep your eyes up. Look to the end. Look to the celebration end, because that's what you want to focus on. Don't focus on the fear in the moment. Just trust the process, and you'll get through it."
That's good.
And so now my eyes are up, and he said, "Squeeze your fist and say yes." And I went, "Yes." And he went, "Stronger." And I went, "Yes." And so he could tell I was leaving a lot on the table. I wasn't in a peak state. And he kind of got in my face and screamed at me and said, "Stronger." And then, now I've got adrenaline. Now I've got fight and flight. Now I'm kind of pissed, right? And so I threw my hands into the air and I went, "Yes." And he goes, "Go, go, go." And I took off, right?
Wow.
And so here's where it gets interesting, Doc. Here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take that first step, oh, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I guarantee you, you do not.
Not just going to stand there?
Not just going to stand there. Ain't going to happen. And so what he does is he positions two people at the end of the lane and they interlock arms, right? And they stop you. And they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so I'm wiping my feet and I'm celebrating. And a girl reaches in and grabs me and gets me out of the way. They're like, you did it, you did it, you did it, she says, and gets me out of the way because somebody else is coming in from behind you, right?
Sure.
And all of a sudden I'm like, holy, I did it. And all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh, I've burnt my feet really bad. Oh my God, that hurts. And I lift up my foot and I look at it. It's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. I lift up the foot. I look. My foot's dirty, but there's no burns.
Wow.
And so that was like a very definitive moment in my life. Yeah. Now I'm thinking, wow, you just walk, and I'm looking back, right? And the coals are bright red. Like, maybe there was a trick or maybe I really didn't do it. So your brain's going, what? And so I had just done something. How many of your listeners can relate to this as far as, leadership and catalytic side of it, right? It's like, how many of you have ever done something and you did it and you were successful, but you don't have a clue how you did it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I did. I didn't do anything. I was just standing in line watching people do it. And the next thing I know, I'm across the fire. And so I'm feeling pretty good. I have to admit, I felt exhilaration. I felt accomplished. I had, all the chemicals in my body were kicking off. People were, high-fiving and celebrating, and the celebration end. And then at the end of the night, Tony takes you through a little process and he goes, good night. We'll see you in the morning. Right. Because this is a 4-day event. This is day one.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets interesting for me, Doc. And that was the next day. So we come into the foyer and there's 3,500 people. And the energy was unreal. I had never seen or experienced anything like it. To this day, other than being back in that environment, you don't experience moments like this. People were laughing. They were hugging. They were connecting at a humanistic level unlike anything I'd ever experienced. So their frequencies he had just raised us up. So Tony knew, he researched firewalking. He knew that it had been around for 1,000 years. He knew what it was used for. He knew it was a rite of passage, a ceremony. He knew it was a graduation. It had been used by the Phoenicians and the people of India and the Indo-European. The warriors always firewalked before they went to battle. The Native American Indians, the Polynesians, the Hawaiians. I mean, my gosh, cultures all over the world have been using it for that purpose. And he knew if you can get you across that fire the next day, now you're saying to yourself, well, if I can walk on fire, what else can I do? And so that was the moment that got me, was the next morning. Because again, I went, wow, look at these people. What a beautiful, beautiful thing to be part of. And again, just people hugging and crying and telling their stories. It was so powerful. And so I found out later throughout the event that Tony uses about 300 people, volunteers, to help facilitate his events. And about 60 to 70 of them are outside all day with the fire team to build that fire, because there's a lot of physical work involved.
Sure.
And so I'm like, well, I'd like to be part of this. Well, one of the trainers, one of the guys I got to know, Ted Macy, he said, hey, man, just call Robbins Research. They'll send you an application, fill it out and send it back. And if you're lucky, you'll get chosen. Well, I did that. And sure enough, I got that letter in the mail. And it said, congratulations, you've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies on such and such a date in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, there I was. And you know what was it was such a magical moment for me when I got there, because when I went through his program, I went through the Personal Power back in '88. I remember thinking, wow, okay, I kind of like this guy now. Yeah. He's pretty cool. And I thought, wouldn't it be great someday to be walking down the street in LA or New York or whatever and see Tony and go, hey, Tony Robbins. Hey, Dave Albin, man. hey, you changed my life. I went through your program. I just wanted to say thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
I had no agenda. And now I'm, at his event working with him as a volunteer.
Wow.
Well, when you fill out that application, Doc, what they do is you put down all your skills and where you live and what you do and all that. So then they can look at you and go, okay, that person would probably work really good over there in that position, right? Kind of thing, right?
Sure.
So I've got a military background. I live on a farm. I've got a security background. So then next thing I know, I'm being asked to help take care of Tony's celebrities. And I'm like, okay. Well, that sounds fun. That sounds kind of cool. Let's do that. And then I also got selected to be on the fire building team because, I put it out there, where intention goes, energy flows, right? So there I was. And it was just magical. It was just, you learn all the logistics and how to build it and what to do. And excuse me, all the training and all that. And then in 96, right? I remember I attended the live event in 95. In 96, they asked me to become a subcontractor. So I, when you're a volunteer, you pay your way.
Sure.
That's your airfare, your hotel, your food, everything. Well, when I became a subcontractor, they paid me a small salary, but they paid my way. And so now I'm part of the, I'm actually a subcontractor for Robbins Research. And then in 2003, unbeknownst to what was going on, we were at Date with Destiny at the Atlantis Hotel in the Bahamas. And when I got there, as soon as I got there, my phone rang, and it was the vice president of operations. She said, "Hey, Dave, you're here." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Hey, will you come to the office? We want to talk to you about something." And I said, "Sure. Where is it?" "Well, you go here, 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 here." And so I got there, and the next thing I know, man, they set me down and said, Tony's like, we'd like you to take over all of our firewalks globally. Wow. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second here. Fear, right? Right. Same thing. Here it comes. This is how it works, right? And that's I'm thinking, wow. And I said, well, guys, I'm really honored, obviously, but I can't. And they were like, well, okay. Tony doesn't like no. He doesn't process no very well. And they're like, so, you can't or you won't. I'm like, well, I can't. And they're like, why? I said, because I homeschool my kids. And they're like, oh, geez, we missed that. So the next thing you know, they're like, well, what if we paid to have them travel with us? Would that help? I'm like, yeah, that could probably help.
Well, we could make that work.
Right. So there was a woman that had worked inside Tony's office who had met my wife. They had gone on a goddess retreat together. And so when they called me into the office, she called my wife and said, "Hey, Dave's going in. They're going to offer him the fire captain's position. So I just want you to be prepared. You might be getting a call from him. Okay, got to go. Bye." Right. Told my wife. So my wife told my kids, and they're sitting by the phone. They're just waiting for that phone to ring, right? And so I said, "Hey, so can I call home and talk to my family about it?" They're like, "Of course." I call home. It's my son. He's 9 years old at this point. And he knows what's going on, right? And I was like, "Hey, Davey, what's going on?" He goes, "Not much, Dad. What's going on with you?" Right? He's waiting for it. He knows it's coming. I said, "Well, I'm down here in the Bahamas. We're doing Date with Destiny with Tony. And I just wanted to call you guys and ask the family. We just got offered the fire captain's position. And what that's going to mean is we'll travel on the road, you guys, your sister and your mom, and we'll be able to go on the road with Tony Robbins, and we'll facilitate the firewalks around the world. And I just wanted to call you guys and see if you guys would be interested in doing that." And my son goes, "You think, Dad?" Right? You think? "Yeah, okay, Dad, whatever you say." And then he goes, "You'll love this, Doc." He goes, "So where's our first event, Dad?" He went right for the closing.
That's awesome.
He went for the closing.
That's right.
Question. And I said, "Sydney, Australia." And so that's how my family started with the Anthony Robbins companies. We went to Sydney. Amazing. And then, of course, they got to go to Hawaii. They were with me when we at 9/11. With Hawaii on the big island at the Waikoloa Hotel. And so they went to Hawaii with us. They went all over the United States and London and again, Australia and, all over the world, really. And so it was a beautiful thing. In 2000, that was in 2003. So that's when I took over as captain. In 2005, we set that world record that you read in my bio.
Yeah.
We did that in London at the Excel Center, and we firewalked 12,300 people. Now, I say it's a world record, but I want to clarify something. I want a disclosure. Guinness was not there. But we're pretty sure that that's the biggest firewalk that's ever been done anywhere in the world, unless it happened somewhere in Africa or something, right, that we don't know about. So it was a spectacular event. And to fast forward it there, to get into the whole idea of, the catalytic leadership side of this, and that was in 2014, Google called us and said, "Hey, are you the Dave Albin does the firewalks for Tony Robbins?" "Yeah." "What's up?" What can I do for you?" And they said, "Well, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you. And if you're not under any contractual obligation or non-compete, again, we'd like to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, well, that's great. So, when's it?" And they said, "Well, we have this event. It's going to be going on at Mountain View. We have 148 executives. Would you be available on this date?" I looked at my calendar and I go, "Yeah, I am available." They said, "Great." And I said, "So, what's your budget for this?" And they wrote, and they went, "This." And I went, "Hey, I could work with you guys." Right?
No problem.
No problem. We're good here. So, and that's when it happened.
Wow.
That's when the light bulb went off. In fact, when I got there, we ended up actually doing a glass walk because they had to do it in the middle of the day, and I don't do firewalks in the middle of the day. I only do them at night for safety purposes. I got to be able to see those coals and build that fire.
Yeah.
And so after the event, we were sitting at lunch, and I'm sitting at a table with some of these Google execs, and one of them turns to me and says, "So Dave, we want to ask you something, and that is, obviously we're Google. We learned quite a bit of information about you." Right. It's like, "Really? Is there anything you don't know about me?" And they said, "So do you know what we want to ask you is, do you know what you have?" So I'm not really sure what you're asking me. They said, "We're talking about corporate team building. There's nothing like us out there in America. You're the man. You're at the top of the mountain here. You may want to consider about taking what just happened here with us out to corporate America and create these unbelievable, life-changing paradigm shift experiences." Because corporate America they're starving for this kind of an event. They're always looking, how do I raise our culture? How do we help improve their self-worth, their self-confidence, their belief, and so on? And he goes, "What better way than a firewalk? There's nothing else out there that will do that at that level." And so I was like, whoa, okay, they're right. And if Google's telling you, you might want to think about doing this, you might want to pay attention, maybe. Okay, I'll listen to you guys. And that's where it happened. Next thing we knew, I was at NASA. Next thing I knew, I was at Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Remax, Chick-fil-A, Heineken. It just snowballed. And so that, the company was started, Firewalk Productions, and Firewalk Adventures was started in 2014. And the next thing you know, guess what? I'm hanging out with William here on the catalytic leadership program. Right. So, so my point of that is, like, you just never know. So, be prepared, be ready, and your life can get beyond spectacular.
That's so good. What was it like working for Tony for 19 plus years? I imagine a lot of listeners are like, what was that experience? How do you even describe an experience like that?
You really don't. Because, well, number one, Tony requires a certain level of leadership and a certain level of being all in. And you can even see me. I kind of raise my body up when I even start to talk about it, right? Yeah. There was always a moment at the Firewalk. I always wore a baseball hat at every event. And I was known for my baseball hat. Well, when Tony would come out and, he's coming out, my team has been working all day. Yeah. We've prepared a Firewalk for 7,000 people. And then Tony brings it, we've done all the training. It's ready. It's showtime. Tony would come out and he'd have his, audio speaker system out there, and he'd talk to him a little bit. And then he would say, "Let the games begin." And when he would do that, I'd take my hat and turn it around.
Nice.
Right. My visor. Yeah. And that was my moment. Right. And so, you work for Tony Robbins, you better bring your A game every single event. because if you don't, you're out.
Mm.
He's not going to let you, bring anything than 100%. He's just not. He doesn't play it. He doesn't play at that level. When you work for Robbins, it's like playing a professional. You're like a professional athlete.
Yeah.
Right. You got to show up. You got to be physically prepared. You got to be emotionally prepared. You got to know your job. You got to be all in, and you got to bring details matter about everything. And so you got to bring that. And then, there's always the backside of it later on. It's like, your buddies and you're hanging out and you're high-fiving and you're talking and hanging out with this guy. And, and here's the one thing I'll say about Tony and what he did for me and my family. And I'll only speak to that because I don't have anything other than how he treated me and my family to talk about. And he treated us like gold. He was so good to my kids, Doc. He treated them. He was so loving and respectful, and he would take them aside and talk to them about, look at you guys, look what you get to do, and your dad's amazing and your mom's amazing. And you know what I mean? He just implanted all this positivity and reinforcement and encouragement, and he worked on their self-worth and their self-confidence and their self-belief about themselves. And that showed up in my kids today. I mean, my daughter just gave birth here a week ago to my second grandchild,
Well,
Charlotte
congratulations.
Ray. Thank
That's
you very
awesome.
much. I'm out of my mind right now with that. My son just got his dream job. He went to App State University, where I live, up in the Boone area. He went to school, and computer science, computer engineering is his thing, always has been. And so he got, he went and got a degree. He's going to, in addition to getting his dream job, they're going to help, and he'll get his bachelor's degree. So they started off, in a crazy amount of money, great company, amazing CEO. And he got hired out of 1,500 applicants.
Wow.
When you take a 9-year-old kid and you walk him across the fire, or a 6-year-old, people ask, how old were your kids when they firewalked? My daughter was 6.
Wow.
My son was 9. They burned themselves? No. Did it change their life? You think?
Yeah, just a little.
Can you imagine when you can encourage and reinforce what's possible in life to kids of that age, instead of tearing them down? They get torn up. They get torn apart right now in the system that's going on right now.
So true.
I won't dive too deep into that, but I'm just saying my kids were in the total polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
We homeschooled. One of the first books I gave my son was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Great book.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Right. So when you encourage and reinforce, which that environment does, that's what you build on.
That's right.
And so Tony was amazing to me. He was amazing to my family, and working for him for 19 plus years, almost 20 years, was just absolutely spectacular. You can't even describe it. It's like a dream. I used to pinch myself once in a while and go, wow, me, a drug addict guy that almost blew his brains out. You got here. Wow. How the hell did you do that?
Yeah.
And I guess I just kind of put one foot in front of the other and lived one day at a time. And again, once I got to AA and I crossed the personal development industry with it, it was like the perfect combination.
Yeah.
It was a very, very powerful way to excel myself and believe in myself that I can basically do anything I want. If you're committed, right, and you're all in, you can pretty much do whatever you want. One of the people that I put out in front of people a lot is Eric Y.M.C.A. And Eric, I put a picture of him on the screen when I'm doing my own events, and he's standing at the top of Mount Everest. And I ask people, hey, who here can tell me where Eric's standing? They're like, Mount Everest. That's correct. Well, let me go on to say that Eric has climbed the 7 highest mountains on Earth. All 7 continents, 7 highest mountains, including Everest. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? He's blind.
Wow.
So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any of your nonsense. I don't want to hear any of that crap that you tell yourself about why you can't do something, because it's not true. Yep. Now, if you want to tell yourself that, that's fine. Go ahead. But it's not true. So I get asked once in a while, what's some of your biggest takeaways from Tony Robbins? And a lot of that is just, proximity, right? Being around the right people is very, very important. Also, excuse my dog. I live in the Appalachian Mountains, so if there's something around my house and he sees it, he's gonna bark. He's gonna bark at him.
It's all good.
All good. So, yeah, the other thing is that, life's all about the story that we create about ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So we have our finger on the on and off switch, and we have our hand on the volume control. And a lot of times, why don't we get what we don't get in life, and why we don't get is the story we tell ourselves about why we can or can't have it.
That's right.
Well, I say all the time, you want to change your life? Change your story and tell the truth, and don't embellish, and don't make things worse than they are. Because, life typically is never as bad as it seems. Life's probably never as good as it seems too. So reality's probably somewhere there in the middle somewhere, right? And so I think that's an important distinction about life and what we do. So gratitude to me is everything.
Yeah.
And when we can exchange our expectations for appreciation, our whole world changes. Right on the spot. Just kick that to the curb. And realize that life is happening for you, not to you.
Yeah. You're not a victim.
That's a biggie.
Yeah.
That's a real biggie. And when you can make that shift, and again, AA helped me with that. When you can make that shift that it was happening for me and not to me, then that victimhood, as you just said, Doc, goes, boop. Nope, that's not it. Yeah. And so it just takes a little bit of, like, what's your rituals, man? What do you do every day when you get up?
Yeah.
I live where I live because that's where I want to live. I chose the Appalachian Mountains. Why? Because it's beautiful. It's scenic. It's majestic. The splendor here is unbelievable. I've got this mountain air. Yeah. You walk out my front door, you can't see any neighbors. Yeah. I've got mountain water coming into my home. I bathe in mountain water. I drink mountain water every single day. And it's one of the scary things about America right now is everybody's dehydrated. Because they're drinking bottled water or they're drinking tap water. And neither one of those is good. Right. So you've got to be cognizant of that. Yeah. Our great grandparents didn't drink bottled water. They drank water out of a stream.
That's right.
It's alive. The water's alive. It's that's what it's there for, right? So, yeah. It just comes down to really looking at yourself, facing your fears, reframing it that instead of forget everything and run, face everything and rise. And when you can do that, those fears you face. Now you remove everything as limits, because if you don't face them, they will become your limits. Because fear is a liar, right? It's just always, fear is there to guide you. I mean, let's face it. That's what it's there. So we don't do stupid stuff and kill ourselves. But what you don't want it to become is your jailer.
Right.
And that's really the key. And I think that's one of the things that, Tony's is focused in on. And that's why he's such a master at what he does. Is because he understands that whole dynamic.
What I love about your story, Dave, is the intentionality that I see through so much of it. This is something that I often talk with leaders about as I'm coaching them. You have control of your intentionality.
Yes.
That's inside of your locus of control. You have control of that.
You sure do.
Too many people see themselves as victims of their circumstances or their situations, as though they are out of control and they can't be intentional. And I fight against that, because it starts with your mindset, and your mindset that you have painted a picture of today is so strong and so healthy. And the intentionality is not just in one compartment of your life. This whole idea of compartmentalization of our lives is something we inherited from the Greeks. And it's such a terrible concept, because it's not true. You can't compartmentalize one area of your life. Everything touches every other part. So I 100%. See your intentionality, right? When it comes to homeschooling your kids, when it comes to the career, how you have helped empower other people, first with Tony and now with Firewalk Adventures, to see what you have done, how you have touched and impacted and empowered other people, used your leadership for the benefit of others. And it's inspiring.
Well, thanks, Doc. And again, I had a lot of help. Let's be really clear about that.
Don't we all?
Right. And, and again, it goes back to the catalytic because it brings all that together. Right.
Yeah.
And so it just comes down to, being brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can take a step back, like what did it take for you and I to be sitting here on this podcast together? What had to happen?
Sure.
Well, if we look at that from a generational standpoint, right? Let's go back like 12 generations.
Yeah.
Well, how many people is that, right? 12 generations, right? You got your parents and then your great-grandparents and then your great-great-grandparents. Well, if you go back 12 generations, that's 4,094 people.
Mm.
And all of them, imagine that. And by the way, that's 400 years. Life was hard back then.
Indeed.
Most of our relatives in our generations got their, what's handed to them. And everything that they did, every single little minute thing that they did, every decision, every word that came out of their mouth, every second had to be aligned perfectly or we're not here right now. And so all the sacrifices, all the pain that they went through gave me and you the opportunity to do one of two things: either take the generation down or take the generation up. And I think it was Grant Cardone that said one time that through generational like that, every once in a while, there's somebody in that that group of family that rises up. And I'll tell you where that really inspired me early on, and that was in AA. Right? Because, you've got the 12 steps that help put your life back together. You've got the 12 traditions that incorporate the group with the people and what to do and what not to say and how to create a group and all that. Because, AA is basically, we're trusted leaders. Nobody governs anything, right? Which is really interesting. Well, in the middle, there's a preamble. And the preamble says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And I went, whoa, okay.
That's good.
I get it. And my sponsors and the guys that were helping me gain sobriety and live a life of sobriety, they're like, Dave, get involved. Become a sponsor, help others achieve sobriety. It's huge. It's the magic. It's what makes things work here. What do you want? Get clear. Clarity's power, man.
Yeah.
If you can get clear about what you want, then your brain will figure out a way. That's just the way that works. That's the dynamic of how powerful the brain. And when you can heart, and it's driven by a powerful why.
Yeah.
Something that gets you out of bed every morning, that puts tears in your eyes, it's done.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I could talk to you for another 3 hours. This has been so fantastic. So much insight here. And I really hope our listeners have gleaned from this. Because, as we've been talking about, the power of intentionality, the power of your mindset, the power of what you choose to focus on and gain clarity on, these are the steps and the ingredients for the success that every single person who's listening is looking for. I know our listeners are going to want to stay connected with you. What is the best way for them to do that, Dave?
Oh, well, thank you. Let's just go to our website.
Okay.
You can go to www.firewalkadventures.com. We just announced the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. And so, obviously you can hire us and we'll come in and we'll create spectacular experiences for your company. You want to launch a product, you just want some inspiration, you want to level up your culture, whatever, we'll come in and we'll design that around your company, around your mission statement, your vision, whatever's going on. I'll sit down with a CEO or business owner and we'll design it specifically between my team and his team. If you now, let's say that you wanted to send somebody from your company to our academy, then that's coming up in October. So they come in, I take them for 5 days. They come up here to the Appalachian Mountains and I show them how to facilitate a firewalk, a glass walk, the board break, the brick break, how to create powerful stories in and around, create the metaphors and just how to do it on their own. And so now that person can go back into that company and facilitate on their own. They don't need to hire me. And then I just kind of act as a liaison between that to help them, their first event. I'll fly out there if they want me to and help them do all that. So the Dave Albin Academy is coming up in October. We limit that to 10 people. simply because I want to keep it small and I want to keep it intimate. And we do a lot of really cool stuff there. They're actually going to be able to attend a live firewalk. I have a client in Atlanta during the academy, and we're going to load everybody up. We're going to go to Atlanta. We're going to put on that firewalk, and so they're going to get to see it live.
Wow.
So they'll see it from the point of the morning of everything we got to do. We'll facilitate it. We'll say goodnight. We'll clean it up, and then we'll come back, and then they're going to graduate the next day. So it's really, really a spectacular experience for those who want to learn, the team building, team bonding things that we teach.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.